It's that little branch of Toyota that ended not so long ago. That little branch that wasn't another Lexus, but instead the opposite. Not a brand of luxury, but one of distinguishability and difference. And its name was Scion. The year is 1999. A box office success called The Matrix is produced, the world is preparing for the end via Y2K, and higher-ups at the car company Toyota are making a plan to introduce young buyers to the Toyota lineup via a project called Genesis. It was Toyota's plan to try and quote-unquote reel in younger buyers into the Toyota lineup, and they were in need of young buyers to make themselves look interesting and, not ancient. Their consumer base was old, and thus they brought out 3 new cars. The 3rd gen MR2, the 7th gen Celica, and the all-new Echo. None of which looked nice, but hey, it was almost the early 2000s, so car design might as well have been a myth. Yeah, these didn't last. Whilst the car sold for a little bit, and the Echo turned out to be more successful by turning into the Yaris, Genesis was ruled as a quite large flop. Obviously, Toyota wasn't going to take no for an answer, and wasn't satisfied with the failure of Genesis, and thus moved on to their next idea, Exodus, otherwise known as Scion. Now it's 2002 at the New York Auto Show as Toyota unveils 2 new vehicles for the lineup. For about 2 years, Toyota had already been selling the predecessor to what we would know as the XB, which they named the BB. Real creative, boys. They also showed off the CCX, which would become the TC. Hard to believe, but yes. At the Greater LA Auto Show, they would then show off what would be the actual cars that would debut in 2004, the XB again, and this time, a new one, the XA, but no TC to be found. Probably a move of mercy. One thing that Scion tried to do was have a quote-unquote no haggle price strategy. Whilst it is something we commonly see now, especially with used car dealerships, this method of selling cars was quote-unquote unorthodox for its time in 2004, with dealers instead trying to simply upsell a pricier car with stuff the consumer didn't want. But Scion wasn't about that. No. Instead, they wanted to give customers exactly what they wanted, meaning there was only one trim level to pick from with the accessories you could then add on. Along with that, they wanted to give the new generation a refresh for their cars in terms of looks. And a fresh look Toyota gave. Up until 2004, the only cars that could be considered close to the lineup that Scion had was the Toyota Vitz, which was only sold in Japan, and was also what the XA was copied from. And for the XB, it was only the Nissan Cube, again, only sold in Japan at the time, and the Honda Element, which was sold in the US, but it wasn't fuel efficient. It was longer, wider, and taller, and it was pretty much an SUV. So with Scion's whole 2 cars for sale upon beginning, and plenty of hypes, things seemed promising for the little Marquet. So, as Scion officially started selling cars nationwide, how many cars collectively do you think they sold in the first year of business? Maybe 40,000, 50,000 perhaps? No. In the first year of business, Scion sold a collective 99,259 cars, a little over half of which were the boxes on wheels, the XB, with the TC coming in second and the strange-looking XA coming in third. Indeed, Toyota decided to bring the TC back to the lineup starting in June 2004, and it proved to be the most popular model of the lineup in the coming years. It was also in 2004 that Scion released the ever so diverse, ever so abundant, and ever so confusing release series, a limited production of cars that were painted special colors both inside and out to give a fresh look to every model year. And for the next 2 years, things stayed just like that, stable and smooth sailing. In 2005, total sales equated to a little over 150,000, with 2006 bringing in 173,000 sales, their most profitable and lucrative year yet. The release series continued on as Scion continued to rake in sales and new customers, and the golden years continued with it. Plus, they had unveiled some concept cars and got some good publicity. So, now what? Do they ride the tide? Do they simply flatten out? Or is it already the end? Find out more after this quick commercial break. We hope you're enjoying the Scion Story. If you are, a subscription to the channel along with enabling notifications and liking the video will be greatly appreciated. We put quite a bit of time and effort into this, so we appreciate all of your support. And to those of you who have already subscribed, thank you. No, really, thank you. Anyways, back to our regular programming of the Scion Story. Unfortunately, it would appear to be door number 3, because it would be after Scion's most prosperous year that things went downhill. Admittedly, there were some factors that led to the downfall, but the biggest, which was completely out of their control, was the 2008 financial crisis.
Lower open expected, and we are expected to go lower right now.
Now it's official, we are in a recession.
Was under pressure. Yahoo down 8.5%.
Not only corporate of America, but corporations around the world. Toyota.
The crisis would cost Scion a pretty penny. Quote from the AutoWise, quote, "Over the next few years, sales of the Scion vehicles would be drastically reduced from their initial debut, to the point where the company was selling 60% less vehicles annually." Yikes. This was not a situation anyone wanted to be caught in. And it only got worse, because once the crisis passed, then came the internal one. Because by the end of 2009, even having a redesign of the XB and swapping the XA for the XD, Scion had only sold 57,961 vehicles, an absolutely devastating decline from only 3 years ago. Even with 2010 arriving along with the TC design, 2010 was reported as the company's worst year since 2003, with less than 50,000 cars sold. Something needed to change, and it came in the form of 2 new cars. The IQ, which is just a Toyota IQ, and the FRS, a rebadged Subaru BRZ. But that helped nothing. Problems only stayed ever so prevalent, and in fact, new ones appeared. Whilst the idea of introducing variety is a good idea generally, it was more of a burden on Scion. The IQ wasn't a huge problem, but it was an anger. At its peak year, it only sold a little below 9,000 cars. So, not the biggest of issues, but not a small one either. The big problem lay in the idea of two large fish, sharing a very small pond, otherwise known as the FRS and TC, inadvertently competing against one another for sales, with the FRS quote-unquote cannibalizing TC sales. And on top of two cars fighting one another to the death, along with another failing to break a 10,000 units per year barrier whilst being called a failure, people became disinterested in the XB and XD by the lack of a redesign since 2008 and 2007. So, Toyota had a meeting in 2015 or 2014 to attempt to try and keep this dying little brand alive. But what could be done? Total yearly sales didn't break 100,000 units since 2008. Consumers were becoming disinterested in Scion due to their lack of innovation, and the company was losing quite a bit of cash overhand. So what now? With all of these problems at hand and a dying car company, Toyota tried to inject Scion with a little bit of life. Maybe just enough to finally get the brand back on its feet. So in the ripe year of about 2015, the true last stand was made. What would be done though? Well, for one, the bread van, the RC car, and the XB would be 86th. After all, the sales of the three only combined to about 16,500 total in 2015. So, they wouldn't see the light of day of 2016. Probably a blessing considering what happened that year. In their places would be two new cars, a rebadged European Mazda 2 sedan and a rebadged Toyota Auris. Auris? I think Auris. These cars would be named the Scion IA and the Scion IM, and it was Toyota's last attempt at a Scion revival. Along with it, they launched a string of strange ads, like this, and this.
No dogs for you.
And finally, they unveiled and showed off their last concept car at several auto shows throughout 2014 to 2016. The CHR, the company's closest vehicle to an SUV. More on its next life later. So, was it good enough? Could this sinking ship be saved? No. No, it wasn't. And no, it couldn't. Sales in general for the rest of 2015 topped out at 56,167. Nowhere near enough to revive the company. That new CHR that was unveiled in 2014? Well, it didn't have enough money backing it or time to allow it to enter production. More of the second one. And despite advertising their cars with some fresh dogs, sales for the IM and IA were still rather poor, with both selling a collective 12,700 units. Not that I blame it. They were introduced the same year that Scion was essentially going bankrupt. Could time have revived this company? Possibly. But that was something they simply had none of. And thus, in 2016, after selling every vehicle that was left, every TC, Scion's 13 to 14 years existence was ended, and Toyota axed and absorbed the small, little branch back to where it once came from, ending the Scion story. Whilst Scion failed to continue, it succeeded in Toyota's mission, partially. The mission that started all the way back in 1999, and the whole reason Scion's existence was needed. Rewind, please. It was Toyota's plan to try and quote-unquote reel in younger buyers into the Toyota lineup, and they were in need of young buyers to make themselves look interesting and, not ancient. Scion had brought Toyota's average consumer age down significantly. The average age of a Scion customer was around 35 years old. Quote, the lowest average age buyer in the industry. End quote. But whilst a small success was celebrated at Toyota for accomplishing an ever so large goal, Scion was a loss. After 2006, it was all downhill from there because of the crisis. And it's sad, considering the culture and following Scion had during its run. There were a lot of people who took pride in owning Scions and modded them out to all hell. Heck, even I'm planning on getting a first gen XB and modding it out, on a surface level at least. So, what happened to what was left? Well, don't even bother asking about the IQ, XB, and XD. Those didn't see the light of day past 2015 when the company was still active. And the TC, their most profitable and lucrative car, the one that brought in the most sales? Nope. At least, the FRS, IA, and IM got absorbed into the conglomerate known as Toyota and repackaged as the Toyota 86, Yaris IA, and Corolla IM. But only the 86 lived on, with both the IA and IM being discontinued after a year or two in Toyota's main lineup. The CHR concept that was shown off throughout 2014 to 2016 was eventually tweaked and molded into the modern Toyota CHR that we know of today, and thus the only sliver of remembrance that clung to the Scion heritage were the Toyota 86 and the CHR. Scion's website would go offline sometime in late 2016 to early 2017 and would simply redirect you to Toyota. And while support and manuals and whatnot are still available, it's gone. It's a small desert now, thus marking an end to this 13-year-old branch. Damn, even I'm lasting longer than that. Now, before we end today's programming, I want to ask the question: could Scion be saved? At all? At any point in time? My answer? No. Due to, again, the 2008 financial crisis. It was simply a case of bad timing at first, but it soon evolved into a lack of creativity. In the beginning of Scion, they had it. The ball was in their court, and they made the best of it. Whilst I clown on the XB and the XA for being rebadged Toyota imports, it was unique to the US market, and it was a fresh look for American buyers who needed something new. But as it marched on, the diversification of vehicles simply didn't exist. And that played a huge role. Now look, I understand what point Scion was coming from, offering smaller, less powerful vehicles aimed at a young audience at a lower price. But not everybody wants a little subcompact commuter. In fact, the FRS was an attempt to cater to an audience that desired more. That was its best attempt. And it's unfortunate that in making the FRS, in an attempt to cater to an audience that desired more, it would come at the cost of cannibalizing its Scion's most popular model, thus leaving room for neither. Plus, that CHR concept that eventually became the Toyota CHR, while selling poorly compared to the Toyota RAV4, it probably could have boosted the brand back into relevance had it been produced under the Scion brand. The SUV boom is extremely strong, and had it been sold then, we might have been seeing Scion for at least a couple more years. But it wasn't sold, so it didn't. So considering everything, the crisis, a small shortage of creativity in both the cars that they made and the redesigns that simply didn't happen, along with the lack of diversity, do you think Scion could have been saved? Let me know what you think. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. See you all next time. Peace out.